Welcome to PAVE's 119th virtual panel. Today, we are going to be talking about Oxa and Beep's partnership and their recent deployments in Florida. My name is Caitlin Magny Miller. I'm PAVE's communications manager, and I will be the moderator today. So let me take a moment to introduce our guests, and then we'll get started. Today, we are joined by Gavin Jackson. He is the CEO of Oxa. Joe Moy, he is the CEO of Beep. And Juan Santos, he is the Senior Vice President of Brand Experience and Innovation at Tavistock Group. So thank you all for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Great. Let's start with some background. Gavin, can you start by talking a little bit about the Oxa Driver software at a high level and sort of explain its key features and capabilities?
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for having me. So at Oxa, we have a very broad and very lofty mission as a company. So our mission is to unlock the benefits of self-driving technology to every person and organization on the planet. And with that, we have a vision for universal autonomy, which basically means that we can operate any vehicle across any terrain, in any conditions, in any vertical market, including, of course, in the important markets of public transportation. And to achieve that, we ultimately need to build a technology stack that's adaptable and configurable and generalizable to the broadest set of possible applications. So inside of all of that, we use a combination of sensors. Those include things like cameras and LiDARs and radars to give us the greatest sort of field of view so that our systems are getting the best quality data for the furthest field, the nearest field, for everything in and around the scene. We then use a combination of complex algorithms, so specialist algorithms, and also machine learning neural networks to ensure that we've got a good balance between the sort of safety critical systems that you want to rely on, and then the broadest coverage of the number of scenes and the number of actors and the number of predictions you need to make. And then ultimately all those things come together so that the system can actually figure out where it is in the world, figure out what's around the scene, what's in that given scene, track all of the dynamic actors that are in space and time, reason with those actors in that scene so that we can build and predict and think about the plan and the path that we're making next, and then ultimately move in and around that scene. And then underneath all of that, we have an AI type system, a generative AI type system that is enabling us to generate new versions of Oxa Driver all the time so that we become experts in more places more quickly and unlocking more places and more applications more quickly. So it's a very broad sort of spectrum of capabilities, but it means that we can drive safely and smoothly in every area of operation, including in Lake Nona here.
Great. Let me kick it over to Joe. Tell us a little bit about Beep and the vehicles that you're using in these deployments.
Yeah, Caitlin, happy to do that. And thanks again for having us. And so, take what Gavin just described as far as the use of technologies to enable autonomous mobility, and then apply that, to the use cases that are specific to what we do as a business. And that is solving for the microtransit deserts across our country that represent first and last mile use cases where we're really trying to extend mobility and accessibility to public and private communities utilizing the autonomous technologies, a shared form factor. And when I say a shared form factor, a 10 to 15 passenger shuttle type environment, and electric platforms that bring a measurable impact in what we're trying to do in support of the environment. And all of that, again, providing extended mobility for arterial type services in these controlled environments. And so we provide that as a mobility as a service offering, a turnkey offering with both public and private customers across the United States.
Great. Thanks, Joe. And Juan, why don't you tell us a little bit about Tavistock Group and your role there?
Awesome. So Tavistock is a global organization. We have operations in about 20 countries, but specifically, and I think the most relevant to the conversation, is what we do here in Lake Nona. So the 2-minute version is Lake Nona is an advanced district of the city of Orlando. Right, we're part of the city of Orlando. We're proud citizens of Orlando, but because it's a private development, we have chosen to actually extend a variety of different pieces so that we can create a living lab environment where we can have ideas like autonomous vehicle mobility flourish in the environment. It's a relatively large space. Lake Nona is approximately 17 square miles. To give you a point of comparison, Manhattan's 22. And because of the size and because of the location, we're able to offer nearly every use case, especially in the mobility side. I mean, the only things we don't do is it's Florida, so no snow and no slope. But aside from that, we have a very broad kind of environment where we have everything from pre-K environments to large universities, single-family homes, apartments. And we do it in an environment where we have some level of control so that we're able to actually move faster than just the city alone because of the private nature of the environment, which is how Beep and has used us in the past, which is they use us as a great living lab for testing ideas and for testing mobility initiatives, where we're very quickly able to deploy solutions for both our visitors and our residents and tenants.
Thanks, Juan. All right. Gavin, let's talk about the partnership between Oxa and Beep. Can you talk a little bit about what inspired it and how you guys really got started on these deployments?
Absolutely. So, I mean, it really kind of starts with a shared vision for what the world should look like. Whenever we speak to cities, and I know it's the same with Beep, whenever we speak to cities and to towns and to communities like in Lake Nona, no city and no town and no community has ever said that we need, less public transit services. We need, more congestion, more single occupancy vehicles on the roads. We need, just overall, we need less mobility. The opposite is true. Like the world is really looking to bring more affordable, more accessible transit to everybody. But the problem is that, and again, this is a vision that we all share, I think, on this call, is that transport operators over the years, in a time where we want to provide more choice and more service and more connectivity, public transport operators have had to sunset and close down more services than ever in the last couple of decades. And the reason for that is because actually they're just not financially viable in the traditional sense, using sort of large buses and using traditional types of service and obviously using human drivers. They're not viable because it's expensive to hire folks. There's not enough drivers in the community to actually drive the buses and such like. And it basically means that hyperlocal services, arterial routes, as Joe mentioned, nighttime services, and lots of sort of areas of the transit system have really been kind of shuttered over the last number of years. And so really kind of what autonomy does, and this is where we have a shared vision, is that it's going to change the economic model over time, such that you can provide more services to more people, making it more accessible, more affordable, and also having those side benefits of reducing carbon emissions, reducing congestion, and connecting every walk of life. So that was, I think, the initial reason why it was natural for us all to come together this way. And then it takes grit and ambition and careful management, and that's something I think again that both teams have shared. Is great to share a vision, but you have to then sort of make it work. And our experience of working with Beep is that they have a vision, but they're awesome at executing that vision. And they have strong partnerships like with the Tavistock group here and the team at Lake Nona. And we've been delighted to be a partner in that ecosystem and hopefully changing the way that the Earth moves, which is ultimately the name of the game here.
Absolutely. So obviously Tavistock Group is a great partner in this. Joe, there is also a deployment at Florida State College in Jacksonville. Can you talk a little bit about that deployment and share a little bit about some of the other parties involved, like JTA and the State College?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, first, let me take a little poetic license here. And Juan is a humble guy, but it was his vision 6 years ago that in large part helped us kind of pioneer the use of this shared mobility offering with these autonomous platforms at Lake Nona. And started with 2 shuttles and 1 simple route, with the vision of how do we use this technology to improve the quality of life for the residents and businesses and visitors in this tremendous 18 square mile community and as he described it, living labs. So, that is where we started, and we've since now expanded the piloting and testing of these platforms across 9 states and 50 some odd different public road routes and deployments. And specific to what we've been doing with Florida State College at Jacksonville, that was one of the early campus deployments. As we think of first mile, last mile scenarios, and you think of academic, business campuses, medical campuses, not a better environment where people may park in a centralized area and need access to different, quadrants of a campus, in the example of Florida State College in Jacksonville. So we have been working closely with the Jacksonville Transportation Authority, for several years now, and they're going to be deploying next year in partnership with Oxa and ourselves, the first really public use case, public service in the form of a fee generating, integrated into the other forms of public transit service in downtown Jacksonville, that's really gained worldwide acclaim for their vision and strategy of how to use these technologies to change the way, we move people around our world and around our society. And so they have been doing these programs around various areas of the city, and in this case, the Florida State College at Jacksonville, in partnership with them to prove out the use and adoption, and most importantly, to educate the communities, get users comfortable with the technology, help them understand how it really is going to advance the alternatives for personal transportation or provide transportation for those that lack alternatives. So that pilot project there has been going on for several months and will ultimately be replicated in other areas around the city. So really important partnership and a great example of kind of how we've advanced from a single location to now over 9 states.
Awesome. I'm going to bring it back to Lake Nona specifically because we have Juan here with us. It seems like a really unique community. Can you talk a little bit more about the Lake Nona community and how the deployment there came to fruition?
Of course. So what we're trying to build is an environment where ideas can flourish, right? That's kind of like the objective of what we have at Lake Nona. Sometimes an idea is a personal idea, right? Or a family idea. Sometimes it's a business idea. But one of the things that goes across all of these different ideas that people are bringing to Lake Nona is we wanted to provide an environment where they could actually move throughout our community with very little friction. So in looking at that process, we did a couple of things. We actually partner with our Department of Transportation and our city to build, roads and parking structures and things like that actually exceed the capacity that the community has. So we have ample infrastructure. We added things like right now we have over 40 miles of trails that actually crisscross the community and allow people to connect. But in that process, we were missing the opportunity for people to not have to think about how they move from one place to the other. And for us, it's in that kind of like mind space that the use case exists. I want people to be able to, leave their house and get groceries and not have to think about, oh, I'm going to have to go get the car's in this garage, I'm going to have to grab it and go somewhere and deal with parking and then gas. And ideally, we want all of those interactions to be seamless, both for our residents and for people that come to work to Lake Nona. And having a rapidly available, very flexible, and at the same time, good for the environment kind of transportation solution was directly in those crosshairs. So when we started talking to the guys at Beep early on, we were really looking for that solution. A lot of people talk about first and last mile, which is of course the type of thing that we do. But in the end, in our case, is intra-community mobility. And it's a multimodal intra-community mobility where people should be completely, they should be able to traverse from one place to the other and from one mobility mode to the other completely seamlessly without thinking, right? And having autonomous vehicles allows us the opportunity, especially in the future as we mature a little bit more, to have some of those concepts like timetables or hours of operation or things like that disappear, right? Because you have an environment that's actually able to be managed with software and intelligence, so that there's always some sort of conveyance available for people to accomplish what they need. So that was really the vision, and part of it is infrastructure. Part of it is great partnerships, and then being an opportunity, a place for people to have great ideas and great platforms like Oxa to really test their technologies.
Great.
Absolutely.
Juan kind of answered this already, but Gavin, I'm wondering if you could share your perspective on sort of the benefits that you anticipate these deployments bringing to these local communities and the larger region.
Absolutely. Well, actually, I am actually going to just jive on, what Juan was talking about there, because if you haven't been to Lake Nona, by the way, I definitely would encourage anyone to go and visit Lake Nona and actually invest in the area, because it's a spectacular, it's how modern cities should be built. And across that 17 square mile community, you have the residential spaces, you have office spaces. The likes of KPMG, for example, have based themselves there for all of their worldwide training. You have, hospital communities, world-class hospital communities on the doorstep. You have entertainment and leisure communities. You have sports communities. I mean, you got everything that you could want and need in one environment, all connected by an infrastructure and a connected mobility service that is autonomous and, as Juan was saying, is sort of ubiquitous in the area. So you ought to, in the fullness of time, when we have an abundance of these vehicles around, they ought to be a tap of the app away, and you're getting the ride to the next part of that interconnected community. The other thing that I think that we're opening up the possibilities to, and clearly we're going to walk before we can run here, but what many people might not know about the world of autonomy and autonomy software in particular is that the technology itself is installed and becomes an expert in the place of operation. The vehicle type is really hot swappable. So if Lake Nona has a community of 17 square miles of autonomy available routes that are enabled by Beep operation and enabled by Oxa technology, then it doesn't really matter what type of vehicle is going down those routes. It could be delivery vehicles, it could be ice cream vans, I'm making it up, but it could be literally anything. So we're really in the first innings of what's possible because of communities like Lake Nona, because of operators like Beep, and technology like autonomy that comes from Oxa.
Right. Yeah, you kind of teed up my next topic here. Joe, thinking longer term, how do you envision autonomous shuttles sort of transforming public transportation in Florida and then beyond? And to add a question from the audience, how could they support greater equity and accessibility?
No, it's a great and a very important question, and an important, piece of our mission and why we exist as a company. We were founded by a longtime business partner of mine, and his father worked in public transit. Milton Reed was the manager of transportation at the city of Gainesville many years ago, and his vision was to how do we provide mobility for all in our communities. Over 50% of our society in the U.S. doesn't have easy, convenient access to public transportation. Many lack alternatives. 25% of our elderly are restricted to their homes. Our disabled community have to schedule days or hours in advance, any form of public transportation. So our vision was very much to extend accessibility and mobility. Yes, to provide an alternative to your personal transportation and get cars off the roadways and improve safety, but more importantly, to provide the connectivity of how people can then improve their quality of life by extending their access to goods and services wherever they are. I mentioned at the beginning the microtransit deserts that we have in our country. If you think about it, some of the larger cities that don't need to be named may have more extensive rail systems or subway systems that provide that type of connectivity. A much larger portion of our cities, in fact, a large majority of US cities, don't enjoy those alternatives. So you can get to a downtown area, but how do you get from there in a centralized depot to access a job or access health services or whatever it is that you seek, to get to in that case? And so the reason that we are so focused as we are in these micro transit use cases that I keep referring to is for that sole purpose of extending mobility and accessibility. One of the key requirements of the platforms that we deploy, because we do serve, in many use cases, public transit authorities and municipalities, is to provide fully accessible vehicles that can be flexible and on demand, but also provide things like automated ramps that are ADA compliant, the tools and technology inside the cabin for visually impaired or hearing impaired passengers. So that is a really, really important component of the mission of our business, is to provide that extended mobility for, people of all abilities.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Gavin, I'm going to come back to you, and Joe kind of touched on this. I'm wondering how you see the role of AVs evolving in sort of the broader context of public transit and urban mobility. And then as a follow-up to that, how do you think we can continue working towards that while also building trust and public acceptance in those technologies?
Absolutely. So firstly, again, just driving on exactly as Joe was talking about there, I think there's two parts of the community that we're solving for here. There is one that is, making sure that you're extending mobility to those that have been sort of cut off by traditional systems of mobility. And autonomy gives you the opportunity to provide more abundant services with a different type of form factor that connects communities of all abilities in that regard. And again, just to extend that mobility offer such that more people can be connected to the services they need, whether that's jobs or healthcare or leisure or anything else in between. And I think that most cities that we talk to suffer from the same challenges in that it's very difficult to connect these communities. The second part, and it's kind of linked, is then for by extension, then the masses of folks that are commuting in and out of transit areas and metropolitan areas typically, and the types of infrastructure and systems that exist today, they're just not cutting it. They're too expensive to maintain. There's bottlenecks across the entire system. And we're not being convincing enough, ultimately, as in the mobility space broadly, to have folks surrender their personal passenger cars at home or, and saving it for other types of journey. We're not being convincing enough. And we're not being convincing enough because we're providing less services. And we're providing less services because the economics are broken. The economics are broken because of all those things that we mentioned before. And one of the core symptoms of that is the lack of drivers that are prepared to drive for a living. And even then, you have across any given service, you have multiple different drivers across multiple different shift patterns, and it becomes more expensive. And then where does that expense go? Well, it either goes to the bottom line of the transport operator, or it is passed on in the form of higher prices to the consumer. And the consumer is protected typically by governments and such like, who control the pricing of said services. And so in the end, it falls to the transport operator to kill the service. And so we're in a world where we're not increasing the number of services, we're reducing the number of services at a time where we need them the most. And so this is really what I think the biggest benefit is. Just touching very briefly on the, how do we then foster trust and acceptance of this type of technology, I think is precisely the way that we're doing it. And it's actually, I have to doff my cap here to how Beep are managing all of this, because they, whether the technology is ready, not ready, or anything else, they took the decision early to say that adoption and trust and acceptability is going to be an important part of how you run a service like this. And this is why we have attendants still, in the vehicle, because we're building trust over time. We want to be explainable to the people that are riding in the service. We want to tell them what's happening. We want to tell them what the vehicle's seeing. We want to educate them on this new sort of mode of transportation, because I guess if it's the first time you're riding on one, it feels like wizardry and it feels like magic, and those things are quite scary for folks. And so it's important for us to engender trust by operating the right way. But it's also incumbent on companies like ours to make sure that we're building for things like safety as the first principle of the entire company. And right across all of our leadership principles as a company at Oxa, our first principle is that we stand together on the subject of safety. It's our number one priority, and we aim to improve the quality of safety and the number of incidents that are caused by vehicular terrestrial mobility. And so I think all of these things combined lead to ultimately better adoption and acceptability, if you will, of these types of services.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit more about safety. Joe, I'm wondering if you could share more. How are you ensuring safety during the operation of the autonomous shuttles, and what measures are in place to build the public's trust in that?
Yeah, no, really important question. I think Gavin just hit on, several key aspects of that. First, I'll go back to your initial question about the technology itself. And Gavin described the importance of having a combination of both, vision technology and sensor technology. And, I don't know that everybody appreciates the importance of that, because it gives you the ability to operate these vehicles, with redundancy. You both are seeing things through a camera and sensing things through the products of LiDAR and radar that are incorporated into a 360-degree view of the entire environment, and better visibility than a human has in a driver cockpit, as an example. And that's a really important aspect. I mean, statistics don't lie. 94% of all the accidents and fatalities on our roadways are caused by human error, impairment, or distraction. Period, stop. Those are the facts. That's 43,000 people a year perish on U.S. roadways. So the technology in and of itself, by default, is making the use of these platforms on our roadways safer, and that's absolutely critical. Secondly, it's important for people to understand, especially in provisioning a public service, it's not just about placing a vehicle on the roadway and, pointing it in the direction you want to go and sending it on a mission. There's a lot of complexities in how you organize routes and you plan services and how you monitor and oversee those platforms. Gavin hit on the importance of attendants on board vehicles today to both educate, inform, and ready people to utilize these technologies at scale. But in the future, and one of the technologies that we're developing, which integrates tightly in with the Oxa platform that Gavin has described to you, is the remote supervision of those services. If you think about any incident on a roadway, there are times when you need to interface with passengers. How do you communicate with a passenger in a vehicle if there's some way, roadway stoppage or whatever it is? How do you maneuver off the side of a road and let people out safely if there is an issue? On a roadway or even with the vehicle? How do you intervene remotely to troubleshoot and solve for any issues that may occur? So that human in the loop is a really, really important layer of additive safety to ensure both continuity of service and safety for the passengers. The last thing I would say is the technology that goes even further than that. How are we using AI on board to identify scenarios that may happen? What if somebody has a health incident and falls onto the floor, and how do you identify that and immediately notify a remote attendant to be able to dispatch first responders or health professionals or whatever is required? So it's a combination of both the technology and the service layer that you embed using other technologies to ensure a quality, safe experience for the riders.
Absolutely. Really great to hear all of the things that you're thinking about with regard to safety. I have a whole another page of questions that we do not even have time to get to. So we're going to have to wrap up here. Gavin, Joe, and Juan, thank you so much for joining us today. We will be posting the full recording of this panel on our YouTube channel and on our website later this afternoon. Make sure you're following us on social media at PAVE Campaign to see that as soon as it's released, or visit our website, pavecampaign.org. And thank you to everybody who attended and submitted questions. We so appreciate your participation. Thank you.